British troops are being deployed to Poland's border with Belarus to help tackle the migrant crisis. 100 military engineers will provide practical support and work to reinforce the perimeter. Thousands of people have been gathering along the border in freezing temperatures over the last few weeks. The EU has accused Belarus of deliberately creating the crisis, which Minsk denies. A Croatian lorry driver has been jailed for 6 years for attempting to smuggle cocaine with a street value of £1.6 million into the UK. Predrag Gojic was stopped at Dover's Eastern Docks in May with 20 kilograms of cocaine hidden inside reels of paper. He told officers he planned to take the drugs to Leicester for a payment of €10,000. UK retail sales rose by 0.8% in October, boosted by early Christmas trading. It ends a 5-month run of falling or flat sales. The Office for National Statistics says second-hand items, toys and sports equipment sold particularly well.
Maybe some of that second-hand stores as people thinking a little more environmentally about their purchases. There was also solid sales for clothing and footwear. As people are starting to go out a little more, as the economy continues to open up further. In fact, it's interesting that UK footfall is the highest of any of the major EU economies and higher than the US, which is, a really refreshing figure to see at the moment.
From next autumn, schools in England will be required to help keep uniform costs down. They'll be instructed to remove unnecessary branded items under new Department for Education guidance. Schools will also have to make sure second-hand uniforms are available. And the Duchess of Cornwall has been making some new friends. As she and Prince Charles continue their tour of Egypt, Camilla visited the Brook Veterinary Hospital in Cairo, a charity for horses and donkeys. And that's enough horsing around for one day. You're right up to date. I'll bring you the latest headlines in half an hour. Now let's return to Liam and On the Money.
And this is On the Money. We're going to be talking about the battle between Amazon and Visa for the next hour, after the former said it would stop accepting Visa credit cards transactions in the UK from January 2022. Plus, each day On the Money features an in-depth Money Talks interview with a business leader, policymaker or someone else with an interesting perspective. Well, today, we're hearing from Lord Robert Skidelski, the historian turned economist who's advised prime ministers and chancellors from across the political spectrum. That's later in the show. And as ever, keep your emails coming. Send us a message at gbviews at gbnews.uk or tweet at gbnews. Stay with us. This is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and you're On the Money. Now, last year, Amazon's UK sales soared by no less than 51% to a record £19.4 billion, as people trapped at home during lockdown turned to the internet retailing giants and e-commerce more generally. Amazon now accounts for over 30% of all UK online shopping, and last year's sales were double those of Marks and Spencer's, which has been around for almost 140 years. By 2025, on current trends, Amazon's UK sales will outstrip those of Tesco. Now, Amazon sometimes attracts controversy. In 2019, the tech giant paid just £293 million in tax on UK sales of around £13 billion. Given that a high share of the company's UK sales are booked in Luxembourg, where the company engineers large losses against which it offsets its tax liability. Amazon, of course, says it pays all taxes legally during the UK and elsewhere and denies any wrongdoing. Now, here's another move by Amazon that may provoke controversy or alternatively might be welcomed. For the e-commerce giant has confirmed it will block the use of Visa credit cards, not Visa debit cards, credit cards, issued in the UK from January the 19th. Amazon says this is due to, quotes, the high fees Visa charges for processing credit card transactions, and many businesses that use Visa services couldn't agree more. Fees charged by the handful of card providers which dominate the cashless payment space have soared in recent years. That's a quote from the Federation of Small Businesses. And as banks up cash deposit and withdrawal fees and the branch network disappears, card fees have been rising sharply, leaving a lot of small firms, as the Federation of Small Businesses says, caught between a rock and a hard place when it comes to payments. In the UK... Sorry about that, I'll continue my monologue. In the UK, more than half of all payments are card-based, and Visa has a huge 80% market share. Now, when we were in the European Union, regulations capped interchange fees at 0.2% of the cost of the transaction for debit cards and 0.3% for credit cards. Now those limits have gone, fees have soared, according to the British Retail Consortium. The banking regulator, which we lauded earlier in this show for proposing a mandatory bank fraud compensation scheme, does have the power to introduce caps on UK card payments, and that may need to happen. In the meantime, Amazon's using its huge muscle to face off against another corporate giant, Visa. MasterCard may be smiling, but is this good news for traditional bricks and mortar retailers, I'm wondering? After all, if Visa relents and lowers card fees for Amazon, smaller physical retailers may end up paying higher charges in the absence of mandatory fee caps. So that's our second On the Money debate today. Amazon versus Visa, the clash of the titans. But who benefits? You know the form, Money Talks. We have cracking panels packed with people who really know their stuff. In-depth discussions in the studio. Jessica Beard, who I'm delighted to welcome from The Telegraph, where she's a personal finance reporter. I write a column for The Telegraph, but no bias. We just have the best people. And, of course, Jasmine Birtles is still with us. We can't get rid of her. She's from moneymagpie.com. Also joining us, Andrew Cregan, Payments Policy Advisor at the British Retail Consortium, and James Bohr, On the Money regular. He's Director of Bohr's Group Limited, which specialises in cyber security. So let's talk to you first, Andrew. What do you think's really going on here? And is there a danger if Amazon uses its muscle to push down charges that Visa pays, if Amazon uses its muscle to push down Visa's charges on Amazon, might smaller bricks and mortar retailers suffer?
Yeah, the situation being an Amazon versus Visa war, I think, is a little misguided. I think this is a situation that has been going on for more than 30 years, and it's actually a matter of justice. It's about whether we can rely on our national institutions to protect us from harm. And in this case, it's anti-competitive card fees that are sky high and have been soaring. And essentially, card schemes have retailers over a barrel. You can't feasibly stop accepting cards altogether in spite of their sky-high fees unless you want to be out of business within a week. So I think where you see that abuse of dominant market position by these card schemes, by companies, any company that's in a position to abuse its dominant market position, you would expect government and regulators to intervene. And that is that's not something that we've seen, or where it has happened, it's not been as effective as it needs to be.
James Bohr, we've talked in the past about the tech giants getting too powerful here on the money. In this case, do you think Amazon might be actually doing some good if it can push down charges that Visa imposes for customers using the Amazon platform?
To be honest, if Amazon are doing it, they're doing it for a very good reason, and it's not because they want to help anyone other than Amazon. They are a business, that's what they do. So, yeah, I'm kind of ambivalent on this one. I almost just want to sit back and have some popcorn and watch the fight happen.
Well, ambivalent, I think, James, is a very well-judged position, because I'm ambivalent on this too. Jessica, welcome to the On the Money studio. You're very welcome. Big fan of your writing. What do you think's going on here?
Now, I mean, Amazon's taking big swings at Visa, as we know. So you've got these two heavyweights, and we know that Amazon is one of the few retailers that can do this. Not very few others have the power and know that they can do it without risking losing their clients and their customers. So I think, you know, they say it's about the fees. I think that Visa is the unlucky one that happens to be targeted. You know, there's a lot of speculation about the fact that Amazon's rolling out the credit card with MasterCard. And, you know, I'm sure that somehow has to play within it. But, you know, it could be better for the industry. We know that small businesses in particular have to pay higher transaction fees. And if a company as big as Amazon can't find a way around it with all their resources, how can small businesses do that? They have no chance.
Jasmine, we had a discussion in the last hour, didn't we, about a new mandatory scheme to compensate victims of APP bank fraud after the voluntary code was just a nonsense. We're both sort of free marketeers, kindred spirits in many ways, but surely we need some regulation here. Now we're out the EU, that cap has gone. We need a cap, don't we?
Yeah, we do. We do. Because, you know, as it has been said, Visa is a behemoth. You know, it's a huge, it's got massive clout. So even with, say, the British Retail Consortium, even if you get all of the small businesses together, still, I think Visa can go, tough. So, yeah, I think we do need to have government regulation here and to help basically us, the small people and the small businesses.
Andrew, I found it quite difficult this morning when I was researching this to actually find written down from a primary source in a way I could quote the kind of charges that Visa have been putting on small businesses since that EU mandated cap disappeared. What are your members telling you about Visa charges since we left the European Union?
Cross-border transactions, which is one of the areas where those fees have surged this year. Those cross-border fees increased fivefold, or the card schemes announced earlier this year that they would be increasing those fees fivefold, and those increases came in a few weeks ago. So it's one of the reasons why this is very topical at the moment, and potentially one of the reasons behind yesterday's announcement. But the point is, I think going back to what James has said about getting out the popcorn and watching this take place, I think that's a very naive way to look at this situation. You know, essentially, you've got one of the largest firms in the world that has, as I said, retailers in the UK and all over the world. They have retailers over a barrel. They have all businesses, all consumer-facing businesses over a barrel because of the high dependence that we have on cards, on credit cards, on debit cards. And to not see that there is harm to you as the consumer, as well as to businesses from this situation, I think means that we're not looking at the situation closely enough. It's clear that government and regulators need to do more to address this situation. The European Union did introduce something called the interchange fee regulation, which capped some of the fees. And what's happened is there's been a huge shift to so-called scheme fees that the card schemes themselves impose. And those have increased in the UK in the past 5 years, £2.5 billion. It's astonishing that legislation that's been so long in the pipeline can be so easily sidestepped by these international card schemes. And it's embarrassing, quite frankly, for the British government and our national regulator that their best efforts are so easily sidestepped, as I say, by the card schemes.
James, the British Retail Consortium, it's a very influential lobby group, and there's clearly a lot of anger among its members and the Federation of Small Businesses, as we said. Do you think we might see some legislation?
There's an important question there, because you mentioned Visa are one of the largest companies in the world. Absolutely right. Amazon are 4 times their size. How much dependence do small retailers now have on the Amazon platform, and how much are they charged to use it? I mean, the reason I want to sit back with the popcorn isn't because I don't care, it's because I think there is no good guy in this.
Yeah.
And so what would you, James, clearly, as you know as well as anyone, we are moving increasingly to a cashless society. What are the alternatives to Visa that could emerge? Obviously, crypto is a different payment system. That's hardly mainstream. It's not going to be mainstream for many, many, many years, if ever. That's a discussion for another day. But what can bricks and mortar retailers do? If Amazon are looking after themselves, surely that leaves the bricks and mortar retailers more vulnerable.
It does, absolutely. And MasterCard have brought in increased charges as well, or are bringing in increased charges. There is no alternative here. I suppose people could go, or retailers could switch to Amex, but probably don't want to do that as it's hardly used and charges are even higher.
Certainly. Well, look, hold that thought, James, Andrew, Jasmine, Jessica, all of our fantastic panel. We'll carry on this discussion after the break. You're watching On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. Another great panel here. Your emails are flooding in. We'll be reading out some of those shortly. This subject's really getting you going, as we thought it would. Stay with us. You're On the Money.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hi there. Colder weather is on the way, but today at least stays very mild. Cloudy for most, and it stays wet in northern Scotland. The exception being Shetland, away from this weather front, but subject to some very strong winds at first today, those winds easing later, and then this weather front bringing that damp weather to northern Scotland. But elsewhere, closer to high pressure, we've still got this mild but rather cloudy westerly airflow. So a lot of cloud around, but the promise of some breaks in the clouds, some sunshine coming through eastern England into northern England later, Northern Ireland, eastern Scotland. And it's a mild day, especially where we get those cloud breaks, temperatures at 13, 14, perhaps even 15 or 16 Celsius there in Aberdeen. Not feeling quite so pleasant where we've got the rain in northern Scotland and staying blustery in Shetland. The rain continues through the evening and overnight in the far north, but further south we keep the cloud cover. Again, some cloud covering the hills and some spots of rain and drizzle around some western hills and coasts. But on the whole, a dry and relatively mild night, not quite as mild as the last few nights. And that wet weather still with us in the far north of Scotland as we begin Saturday. And it comes south, so a spell of rain for Scotland, Northern Ireland during the morning, before it then pushes into Northern England, and it does clear during the afternoon from Scotland and Northern Ireland with sunny spells and blustery showers replacing it. It stays cloudy, roasty dry, but with a few spots of rain here and there in the south, and 12 to 13 Celsius, a degree or so down compared to today. Here's that area of rain then, coming south on Saturday night. It fizzles out somewhat, so not much rain on it, but it does mark a significant change once we clear that cloud. Brighter skies arrive from the north, sunny spells on Sunday for many places, but some showers around coastal areas. It will also be colder.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back, you're on the money. Now today we're asking Amazon versus Visa. Who wins? Who benefits? After the retail giant said it would stop accepting Visa credit cards from January 2022. I'm still with my expert panel, Andrew Cregan, Payments Policy Advisor at the British Retail Consortium, James Bohr, the Director of Bohr's Group Limited, which specialises in cyber security. Jessica Beard's here. She's the personal finance reporter at The Telegraph and our On the Money regular. Can't get rid of her. The moneymagpie.com herself, Jasmine Birtles. Jessica, let's turn to you. Consumers watching this, yes, it's a really interesting corporate story, and I'll be joining James with my popcorn. It is a corporate tussle extraordinaire, and Amazon did similar things with Walmart in the States just a few years ago. But what does it mean for consumers?
Now, there are 20 million Visa credit cards out there, so it will affect a lot of people. And if you look at the timing of it all, that in particular is interesting, because Amazon could have just said it's going to ban it come January, but they went one step further, and they're actually giving out cash-like incentives. They're saying that anyone who changes their Visa default card to another card can get £20 if they're Amazon Prime member, and anyone else can get £10.
They really are flexing their muscles, aren't they?
Exactly.
As James Bohr said, this is not altruism, is it? This is about Amazon.
Yeah. And I mean, it's coming ahead of Black Friday next week. Amazon is really most prominent in people's minds when, at times of big spending, and in the lead up to Christmas, this is the moment where everyone's going to remember how much they use Amazon.
Who benefits? Consumers?
No, I don't think so. Well, unless, of course, as Jessica says, they go for the £10, £20.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think, as you say, somebody's got to pay. And Visa is potentially, as you say, without these caps, they're going to put the extra costs onto the small businesses. That means it's going to be put on to individuals. And what bothers me is that, you know, I'm very pro-cash, increasingly pro-cash now. And you know, this is the sort of thing that we would deal with if we did go totally digital.
Yeah.
We would be at the beck and call, basically, of Visa, MasterCard and Amex, whoever, frankly.
Andrew Cregan, let's go back to you for the retailers' perspective in this. Retailers who I imagine aren't just about e-commerce, but are largely about bricks and mortar shops.
Yeah, well, I think to pick up on a comment that was made before, again, I'm not really picking on you, James. The size, the size of Visa versus the size of Amazon might make this the optics of this alluring, but the point is that it's all retailers across the world that are subject to card fees in whatever form that they come. And the fact that those fees here have been rocketing over recent years is something that action needs to take place on. And so the fact that Amazon have been able to shine a light on this issue, given their size and therefore the global interest in the decision, is by the by. I think the more important issue is why this situation came about in the first place, and why is it that government and regulators aren't taking robust and urgent action to stop the abuse of these international card schemes.
Why is it, James Bohr, that the government isn't taking robust and urgent action? What's your view?
Well, there was action taken when we were in the EU, which is why we had these caps in the first place. It's just that they've gone now. As to why they're not taking action now, it could well be busy with a few other things going on. This isn't necessarily at the top of their minds. Might be after Amazon's announcement. we'll see.
Jasmine, what do you think is going to happen here? Obviously, and we'll read out a statement from Visa in a moment, this doesn't affect anything either on Black Friday, the big Christmas sales rush, or during Christmas. So if you've got a Visa credit card, you can use it on Amazon till
19th of January.
19th of January.
Yes.
But in policy terms, what do you think is going to happen here?
Well, as Jessica mentioned, or as you mentioned, they've already had a bit of a fight with Walmart. They've had a fight with Kruger. This is Visa, I mean, and ultimately they backed down. So I think they're going to have to back down. Honestly, they are going to have to do that. The next question, though, as you say, is where are they going to get the rest of the profit that they've lost? Because they will have lost a lot of profit by doing that. It's likely that they will then move on to the individual retailers. So, as you said at the beginning, I think government needs to step in. They need to be very aware of this, and they need to put some caps on, because otherwise we, the consumers, are ultimately going to pay it. Whether we pay with Visa or MasterCard or Amex or with cash, indeed, we will ultimately pay for it.
Jessica, it strikes me that in the end, Amazon and Visa will do a deal. They're very shrewd people. And the more this fight's in the headlines, the more the government's going to come under pressure to introduce those fee caps, which James and Andrew say that they want, right?
I mean, you'd hope so, because Visa earlier this year said it planned to increase fees from 0.3% to 1.5%. That's an enormous jump. So, yeah, all eyes on regulators at the moment, hoping that at some point they're going to have to intervene.
Andrew, let's turn to you for a final comment. What would you really like to happen? You're the person on this panel who's speaking for thousands and thousands, literally, of businesses. The more this fight is in the headlines, the more people like Jessica are going to be writing about it in her paper, the more people like me are going to be going on about it on television. Do you think there will be fee caps eventually?
Well, there certainly should be. And specifically in terms of that robust action, we've been very clear what that needs to involve. Without wanting to get into the technicalities of the card payments market, we've said that there needs to be an abolition of so-called interchange fees and a regulation of so-called scheme fees. So very, very briefly, one of the reasons why this market is so anti-competitive is that it has perverse incentives not to drive costs down over time, but to drive costs up. Because there is, for the card schemes members or the card schemes clients or the card schemes customers are banks, and banks receive a revenue every time you use your card to pay for goods or services in store or online. And so the banks want more of that revenue. And so the incentive is actually for the card schemes to increase those fees that you receive as a bank, as a customer of Visa or MasterCard or any of the other card schemes, not to drive those costs down over time. And so that's one of the reasons why businesses have ended up paying more and more and more to be able to accept card payments. And that's one of the reasons why we all as consumers will end up paying higher prices for those goods and services that we're buying from those businesses.
Well, a spokesperson for Visa has told GB News that, quotes, UK shoppers can use their Visa debit and credit cards at Amazon UK today and throughout the holiday season. We're very disappointed Amazon's threatening to restrict consumer choice in the future. When consumer choice is limited, nobody wins. We have a long-standing relationship with Amazon and we continue to work towards a resolution. And an Amazon spokesperson told GB News the cost of accepting card payments continues to be an obstacle for businesses striving to provide the best price for customers. These costs should be going down over time with technological advantages and advancements, but instead they continue to stay high or even rise. As a result of Visa's continued high cost of payments, we regret that Amazon.co.uk will no longer accept UK-issued Visa credit cards as of the 19th of January 2022. Thank you to all my guests for another in-depth discussion there. Andrew Cregan, who's from the British Retail Consortium. James Bohr, cybersecurity expert. They're still friends, don't worry. Jessica Beard, personal finance reporter at The Telegraph and founder of MoneyMagpie.com. Jasmine Birtles. You're watching On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. Today's Money Talks interview is Professor Lord Robert Skidelski, one of the UK's most renowned academics. So stay with us for that, and also for the GB News headlines with Rhiannon Jones.
I'm Rhiannon Jones. Here are the latest headlines. Counter-terrorism police have confirmed that the bomb, which exploded outside the Liverpool Women's Hospital on Sunday, had been packed with ball bearings. They say it could have caused significant injury or death had it exploded in the way the bomber intended. An investigation is underway after 2 women and 2 children died following a house fire in Bexley Heath in southeast London. The victims were rescued from the first floor but all died at the scene. The fire is not thought to be suspicious. The UK is banning Hamas, designating it a terrorist organisation. The move brings British policy in line with the EU and the US. The Home Secretary, Priti Patel, says Hamas has significant terrorist capability. A Hamas official has described the decision as biased towards Israel. COVID booster jabs have been added to the travel pass. Millions of people who've had 3 doses can now prove their status with the NHS app. It means they'll be able to visit countries where vaccinations are only valid for a certain amount of time without having to quarantine. Austria will enter a national lockdown from Monday for at least 10 days. Unvaccinated citizens were told to stay at home last month, but Chancellor Alexander Schallenberg says nationwide restrictions are now needed to try and contain a 4th wave of COVID cases. And Camilla, the Duchess of Cornwall, has been making some new friends as she and Prince Charles end their tour of Egypt. Camilla was in her element as she visited a sanctuary for injured horses and donkeys in Cairo, originally founded in the 1930s to help Britain's war horses. I'll have more on all of today's main stories at the top of the hour. See you then.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. You're on the money with me, Liam Halligan. Now, we've been reading your emails on today's debate. Amazon versus Visa. Who benefits? Wanda says, all more reason to protect cash. Government needs to ensure the cashless society never arrives for all small service businesses. Marianne says, people use a credit card, often with good reason. It offers them more protection as a consumer. And for people who live from paycheck to paycheck, a debit card isn't an option. Good point. Elizabeth says we should not be heading for a cashless society, and I know that many of you feel the same way, and that's a topic we'll be covering in future episodes of On the Money. Keep your emails coming. Tell me what you want to be discussed on this show. Now, time for my daily interview series. Here it is. It's Money Talks. Today's Money Talks is with Professor Lord Robert Skidelski, one of the UK's most influential academics. Skidelski secured his reputation as a historian of international repute with his 3-volume biography of John Maynard Keynes, the most important economist of the 20th century. And that triple volume won the highly prestigious Wolfson History Prize. In this wide-ranging Money Talks interview, Skidelski discusses with me how he helped David Owen to set up the SDP in the early 80s, how economic policy making actually works behind the scenes, and why the efforts of Remain voting MPs and peers to hold a second referendum in a bid to reverse Brexit were, in Robert Skidelski's view, completely wrong. Professor Lord Skidelski, thanks a lot for joining us on The Money. Just tell us a little bit about your academic career and how you came to be basically an economic expert in the House of Lords.
I started studying history at Oxford, and so training as a historian. Then, when I did graduate work, I became interested in the politics of economics. This was in interwar years, and then gradually in economics itself. And that led me to the ambitious project of writing a book about the greatest economist of the 20th century, who was John Maynard Keynes. And of course, I didn't know much economics then, but I got a lot of help from economists all over the place who were absolutely determined to put me right on any aspect to do with the great man. So I had the benefit of tutorials with Milton Friedman, Paul Samuelson, Nicky Caldor, Joan Robinson, James Mead, all the best living economists of the time. And I think they compensated me, really, for lack of formal training in economics. I felt I was all right.
So you're a historian who became an economist and very interested always in practical policy making. And of course, when David Owen and Shirley Williams set up the SDP in the early 80s, breaking the mould of British politics, you were quite involved, weren't you?
Yeah, I was one of the founding members, and David Owen was the big attraction for me. Not so much. I liked Shirley Williams a lot, but David Owen was the sort of real force behind it. And I got onto their economics committee quite quickly. Now, whether I had any part in shaping the policy, I'm not sure. It was the idea of the social market economy, and that was a David Owen phrase which he imported from Germany. But what I did do was to keep Keynes alive in the 1980s, in a way, because he was the great economist of the middle way. At that time, I mean, I don't know, you're too young to recall, but, politics was sort of divided between those who wanted to nationalize everything and those who wanted to privatize everything. And the SDP said, no, look, there is a middle way. You don't have to do this. Social market economy, Keynesian economics, kept alive in that period. So in that way, I influenced the SDP. And I think the SDP, although it failed electorally, did actually break the mould in some way of British politics.
I think it's fair to say there wouldn't have been New Labour, there wouldn't have been Tony Blair and Gordon Brown coming to the fore as the huge force they did without the SDP. Do you think that's fair?
I think that's fair. I think the third way reeked with SDP-isms. I mean, they couldn't call it the middle way, but the third way. And yes, I think that's absolutely right. I think British politics was changed for the better by the intervention of the SDP, even though the electoral system prevented it ever, establishing a very big base in Parliament.
You've often spent time with leading policymakers, chancellors, prime ministers, both Labour and Tory, people at the highest echelons of the SDP, as we've said. How is policy made in practice? Because we can read economics textbooks and we can think about modelling and all the technical side, but it's a real mix of influences that means an economic policy actually happens, isn't it?
It is, and at one time, I think economics was better called political economy, because that takes into account the fact that it's not an exact science. You can build mathematical models for all you like, but it's rather like children and their toys. They mistake them for the real world. They're little robots and and economists are like that. They're very infantile, economists. I mean the people who are model builders.
Yeah.
They like their little toys, and they then confuse them with the real world. But of course, and of course that's very prestigious, because they then claim to be, I think Paul Samuel said, the queen of the social sciences, because these models enable them to predict, quantify and predict. Well, they can't, because there are too many intervening things, and politics is the huge intervener. And I think political economy, going back to Adam Smith, but of course Keynes as well, it took a broader view of what caused economies to behave in the way they did. And the idea that you could predict the future mathematically exactly was rubbish, and politicians have never acted on that assumption. They've always understood that we make the economies, that uncertainty is inescapable, and they have to win elections. So the serious answer to your question is, I think economics, the best it can do is to reveal patterns and likely outcomes in a broad sense, in which it's exactly like all the other social sciences, and its claim to superior empress status.
And predictive power.
You're not buying it?
No, I'm not buying it.
Scientific modelling, economic modelling, it's really come into focus during the pandemic, hasn't it? Where you've had epidemiologists, statisticians, professors making predictions about what will happen that very similar to economic modelling, and those models have often turned out to be bunk and actually quite damaging to the public discourse.
Yeah, but of course they're more soundly based, because they deal with the body and not the mind. And the body is more amenable. I mean, medicine is a more accurate science than economics. Economists have always thought of themselves rather like pediatricians or diagnostic doctors, with the society as the unit to be operated on. But of course that is rubbish. But epidemiology is more accurate. I mean, medicine does make progress. It does uncover truths that were not there before. We don't rely any longer on Paracelsus and people like that for our diagnostics. So I think there has been more progress in medicine than in economics. I think every modern economics idea was stated perfectly reasonably 200 years ago. And you can't say that about medicine.
But when it comes to economic policy making, Robert, models are a lot less important than many of us might be taught to believe. Personality is also really important, isn't it? The personality of the civil servants, of the politicians, the ministers. You got to know Margaret Thatcher quite well. You wrote a book about Margaret Thatcher. To what extent do you think her personality shaped her policy-making era, Blair's personality, and now Boris Johnson's personality?
It's difficult to say. Of course, the personal impact of a leader on policy is huge. And that's not just because the position that leader commands in Parliament, right? but also the position that the leader has in the country. And persuasiveness is essential part of the art of politics. If you can't persuade people to follow you or to do what you'd like them to do, you're no good as a leader. I mean, this is one of the problems of the Labour Party in a way at the moment. But and that's why Boris Johnson gets away with a lot of things, which perhaps he shouldn't, because he's an outsized personality. People can. Now, someone like that, of course, will have a tremendous authority, but the British system is very civil service dominated, and there are really two departments in Whitehall that really control most of policy. One is the Treasury, domestic policy, and the other is the Foreign Office. And they're the premier policy-making departments. And the politicians at the head of them they're not their prisoners by any means, but if they're good, then those two departments have enormous impact on what happens, both in domestic policy and foreign policy. And all the other departments are sort of less important.
As a historian, you've met lots of leaders in the UK and around the world and studied many more. How do you think Boris Johnson will shape up as a leader when historians look back at him?
It's hard to say. You know, his time isn't run. I think this is a sort of assessment that's easier to make after a person has done his bit and then retired from the scene, and then you can recollect in tranquility what he or she may have achieved. Now we're in the middle of the Boris Johnson era. He's got a very good chance, I would have thought, of getting another term. He may slip up in some ways. Leaders often do. So that's another element of uncertainty in politics, which makes prediction, in this sort of area pretty useless.
Certainly been very difficult for him to wield his 80-seat majority, given we've been hit with the pandemic.
I actually supported him when he prorogued Parliament in was it 2019?
In order to get the Brexit deal through.
And I was against the lawyers who got up in serried ranks and said this is monstrous, a breaking of international law. And I thought, well, come on. I mean, people voted for something, he's got to get it through.
That's interesting, because you were broadly supportive of Remain before the referendum, and yet I know from talking to you at the time you were quite offended at the idea that the political media class may try to engineer some kind of second referendum, some kind of Brexit reversal. Why were you so offended by that? Was that your historical instinct that it was wrong?
It was also common sense, I think. If you hold a referendum and say you're going to abide by the results and then you don't, I mean, that's terrible for democracy. It would divide the country much worse than the actual referendum did. And you'd get a backlash, a huge backlash. So I think just from political common sense, I think attempts to reverse it, and the argument, well, they were lied to, and had they been told the truth, it was all fake news, Brexit and so on. It doesn't wash. I mean, everyone lies up to a point when they're fighting these campaigns.
We've known each other for many, many years. We both see ourselves as kind of outsiders. We're from immigrant stock. You're from a Russian background. I'm from an Irish background. Were you surprised that the British establishment, so many people in the British establishment, felt they could possibly reverse that Brexit referendum?
I was surprised, actually. I
was too.
I think
it shocked me.
Yeah, I think that the European commitment was so strong they couldn't concede that the British voters could do anything so stupid, and therefore it had to be that they were misled, and therefore there had to be another referendum, let's say, in which they were finally told the truth, in which their good sense would prevail over the Brexit nonsense. I think that was the mindset. And they didn't think they were thwarting the cool will of the electorate, but its misled will. Well, again, it doesn't work. I had big arguments with a very good friend of mine, Andrew Adonis, about this, because he was one of the people who was trying, in a way, to get the result reversed. And I kept saying to him, you can't do it. And he said, yes, we can. And so there was all and I think they were completely wrong. There's a case against having a referendum. We know that it was Cameron's ploy to neuter Farage. We know that he mismanaged the referendum in serious ways. He didn't get enough concessions from Merkel, and he took it too lightly. He just assumed that the Remain votes. We know all that, but having done it, there it is. You have to live with the consequences. Whether Britain is now going to be global Britain and sail back into a 21st century version of the British Empire is much more dubious.
Do you think global Britain is real? Obviously, we're not going to go out and colonise countries and so on. But you know, you've done a lot of work overseas. You're an international historian. You've had overseas business interests in the past, Lord Skidelski. We're pretty good at this stuff, this international business stuff. Shouldn't we be trading more with the rest of the world? After all, the rest of the world's growing a lot faster than Europe.
Well, of course, if we produce anything the rest of the world wants, then of course we should trade with anyone we can. And we produce very, very superior financial services, and we do produce a few goods.
Ninth biggest manufacturer in the world?
Yeah. Technology and all kinds of things. Yeah, we should do well. And it's in our history, actually. I think people ignore the extent to which Britain's history was forged outside Europe and not in Europe. The sun never set on the British Empire, it was said. Quarter of the world. Largest empire in history. Largest nation state in Europe. It was the largest empire of any nation state in Europe. And that's a tradition. I think people are aware of it. They're instinctive explorers, and they want to spread themselves. I think that's been a characteristic of an island people.
And that was Professor Lord Robert Skidelski. You can listen to the full 25-minute version of that interview on my Money Talks podcast, on the GB News YouTube channel, or on the GB News app. Give it a whirl. Lots of interviews there with the likes of Sir Martin Sorrell, Foreign Secretary Liz Truss, former Tory leadership candidate Michael Portillo, all talking about economics, business and finance. And that's it for today's On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. Join me again 1 p.m. on Monday, and I'll be bringing you your dose of economics, business and consumer news. Thanks for joining me today. Have a lovely weekend. I hope you've enjoyed our bumper Friday 2-hour double bill. This is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and that was On the Money.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hi there. Colder weather is on the way, but today at least stays very mild. Cloudy for most, and it stays wet in northern Scotland. The exception being Shetland, away from this weather front, but subject to some very strong winds at first today, those winds easing later, and then this weather front bringing that damp weather to northern Scotland. But elsewhere, closer to high pressure, we've still got this mild but rather cloudy westerly airflow. So a lot of cloud around, but the promise of some breaks in the clouds, some sunshine coming through eastern England into northern England later, Northern Ireland, eastern Scotland. And it's a mild day, especially where we get those cloud breaks, temperatures at 13, 14, perhaps even 15 or 16 Celsius there in Aberdeen. Not feeling quite so pleasant where we've got the rain in northern Scotland, and staying blustery in Shetland.